Welcome to Trial Costa Rica. I'm your host, Adam Baker. This is your weekly video series that discusses everything travel, relocation, inspiration, and living in Costa Rica. So know before you go. Guys, if you're enjoying this video and this episode and this series, please give us a thumbs up. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe to never miss out on a weekly episode. This week's guest is Aidan Mullan. Aidan is a business development specialist at the NAMU Travel Group. After meeting his Costa Rican wife in Michigan, they lived together for 3 years in Belfast over in Ireland until she asked the big question, Aidan, can we move to the tropics? The weather is far too grey and depressing. Of course, Aidan said yes. So they moved back in 2011. They've been here for the last 10 years. Since then, Aidan's raised his family. So who better to speak to about living in Costa Rica, raising a family and speaking Spanish than Aidan. Aidan Mullan, good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning, Adam. Great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us on our 6th episode of Trial Costa Rica. Whereabouts do we find you?
I'm in San Jose, in an area called Tibas here, pretty close to the center of the city.
Tibas is known by most locals for the stadium of the biggest soccer team in Costa Rica, Saprissa, right? Some might argue.
Yeah, that's right. Saprissa Stadium is just maybe a 15-minute walk away from here. I mean, you can even hear concerts there when there's concerts.
I was going to ask you, yeah, I can imagine you can hear a few of the goals going in as well.
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, the fans at that particular stadium are nuts.
You are in the heart of San Jose. Well, let's jump straight in, Aidan. I've already given you a bit of an introduction. We know you've been here for more than a decade now, but fill me up, catch me up a little bit on what took you to Costa Rica initially. What brought you down here or over here?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've lived here for a little over 10 years now. I moved here in May 2011. My wife is Costa Rican. I met her way before then even, and in Michigan when I lived there for a couple of years. After a few years, we found each other again online, and she moved to Ireland for a few years, and those long dreary days where she had about enough of those, and she asked me if I would mind moving to the tropics. I said no, so I've been here since then. So it's actually the longest I've lived anywhere since I've been an adult actually, really.
How many years did she spend with you? Was it Belfast, right?
In Belfast, yeah, and 3 years.
So it took her 3 years to ask if you wanted to move to the tropics.
No, I mean, it was kind of always on the cards a little bit to kind of move back and forward. But when we came here, we ended up just kind of settling a little bit. And since then, I mean, we've had a couple of kids and stuff as well. Like we got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So it just makes a bit more sense to stay here instead of back and forward, So maybe that was the plan all along,
For sure. I have a ton of questions to ask you about that, especially raising your family. But what about your experience of moving to Costa Rica? Had you any experience of Costa Rica before you moved there?
Just once for like a few days. I came here to get married in April 2008. So I just actually spent a few days here. We had a short honeymoon in Manuel Antonio on the Central Pacific coast. And and went home after that, and 3 years later we came back to move. But no, I mean, I've always been someone to travel around a little bit, but I hadn't really experienced Latin American culture before moving here.
Yeah, that's quite funny. All the other people that I've been chatting to on this channel, some of the biggest tips are, if you're thinking about relocating or moving to Costa Rica, make sure to stay in the country. Certainly a few weeks, but if you can stay for the 90 days, right, 2 or 3 months and rent and get a feel for it. You didn't really have that experience. You had
No, not really. I mean, I think it was a little bit different for me. Obviously, I was coming over to live where my wife is from, So, yeah. And like I said, I'm not really one to super attached to home. Of course, I miss my family and stuff all the time, but really, it didn't matter that much where I was, as long as we were together and we could make a home and anywhere really.
Fantastic. What was the biggest culture shock then in actually, staying here after moving?
Well, I mean, it wasn't really a shock because obviously I knew it, but being someone who's never lived in a Spanish-speaking country or a country with any other language really was difficult in the beginning. I think that it's actually still a little bit difficult for me. I've never been really that great at learning languages. I mean, obviously I understand tons, but speaking the language a little bit maybe of that is to do with confidence and stuff as well, so I get by, um maybe it wasn't so much of a shock as what it was kind of, um I don't know, just something difficult to kind of get past, and the population of the city, I would say, was a big thing for me. Being from Belfast, it's a pretty small city. Northern
Yeah.
Ireland only has about 1 million people in general. So the city, um, is always it's fairly quiet. It's kind of laid back. I mean, nowadays, maybe 30 years ago, it wasn't for
Sure.
obvious
Yeah.
reasons,
Yeah.
but here, so many people in the Central Valley. The majority of the population are here. That was tough, like the buses and yeah, I mean that was probably a fairly big culture shock for me.
Yeah. A lot of hustle and bustle as
A
opposed to
lot of
work
hustle
out
and
fast and
bustle, and not a
hard.
real sense of any organization around it either. Like
Yeah.
you just be at the bus stop until the bus comes. Back home, you go to the bus stop at this time, and that's when the bus comes.
Yeah.
So it's like no scheduling and stuff like that, and kind of street sellers and stuff. You don't see tons of that and back home either. But it was something that was definitely a culture shock, but not something I disliked. It was kind of um, it's kind of exciting and stuff as well. So that'd probably be the main thing.
I remember when I came over and I got off the plane in 2006, exactly the same experience. Not really a culture shock in a negative way, just totally different from the southwest of
Yeah, it's
Britain.
super different.
Yeah, came out, all the buses, everybody, lots of noise, get into the heart of San Jose.
How many people are on them and stuff as well? Just like
So people, taxis, the cables over the top. I remember that in my early 20s. Yeah, so you're saying, yeah, I can imagine the hustle and bustle. A lot of people sometimes ask, oh, but I don't speak Spanish. So you've been here now 10 years, and you mentioned, as you say, you're still kind of picking it up occasionally. How much of an issue do you think that really is? And has it been easy for you to get by?
It's not that big of an issue. I mean, obviously, like my wife is a very good English speaker, a professional interpreter, really, actually, so, and then now my kids are bilingual. So it's a little bit easier for me to get by than it might be just for somebody by themselves. And like I said, I understand tons anyway, so you can definitely get by here without a very good level of Spanish, but you should definitely be making efforts. It's their country, and whereas a lot of Costa Ricans do enjoy speaking English and can speak English very well, but again, it's about trying to get that balance of being respectful of the country and stuff as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Speaking Spanish in Costa Rica, everybody appreciates it when you go to a foreign language, a country not native to your own, and you at least make that effort. And
yeah, what's funny though is like when I go to somewhere like Miami or I don't know, even Panama or Nicaragua, and I'm trying to speak Spanish to people. It's very different here than what it is in those other countries. So in Costa Rica, there's a lot of slang that kind of goes with, and I'm sure those countries have their own slang as well. But so going between the two countries, it's not like when I was a kid learning a little bit of Spanish in class and going to like Madrid or something. It's like completely different.
What about, do you have a strong Irish accent speaking Spanish? Does anybody point
No, I think that would be too impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, my accent's fairly soft these days anyway.
What about after you'd settled in and you've been in the country for maybe 3 or 6 months or so? What surprised you about Costa Rica that you probably didn't expect?
I guess I wasn't really. It's funny because I work in tourism, but I wasn't really aware of how huge tourism was here and how many cool places there were to see. Like I just thought, bit of jungle, bit of beach. I'll enjoy that now and again. But obviously now working in the tourism industry, the whole country is the tourist hotspot. So I'm always exploring and finding new things even after 10 years. I'm still going to new places that I've never even heard of before. So that was a big surprise for such a small country to have so much, not just the biodiversity, everybody knows about the animals and stuff, but just like little hidden gems, whether that's a street in San Jose with a couple of really good pizza shops that I didn't know about, or a volcano that I didn't even know was still active, so yeah, pretty big surprise for me was just finding out that there was so much to a small country. This country is about the same size as Ireland, and it just feels like there's so much more to it.
And that's even more. I mean, both you and I have been working in tourism for more than a decade here. That's incredible. The fact that we still work in travel and we're traveling a lot for work. And then, well, like you say, that still happens, which I think
it's really,
it is a surprise.
Yeah, no, so it's pretty amazing. Then on the other hand, and the other side of things, like trying to do things like, I don't know, whether it's get your license or get a bank account or things like that, the immigration process, everything is very lengthy. It takes a while. I mean, obviously, if you have patience, you're fine. So it's
a big one that's come up a few times.
Yeah, no, and I've seen a couple of the other guests, and I agree with most of what they're saying.
Yeah,
I'm a fairly patient guy, so it doesn't really bother me too much as long as things are happening. It's going to take as long as it takes, so I can't change that. So try just to relax about it.
Oh, that's good. That's a great outlook to have, and that's super important. If you knew that before coming, I never had that.
Yeah, and I've always been a little bit like that. Kind of. I mean, I'm from a fairly laid back family and stuff as well. So I mean, it's not too difficult, and hopefully that can rub off on the kids as well.
Yeah.
And
there's a question that I like to ask everybody. Sometimes it feels a bit silly because I'm going to ask you, how does it compare to Ireland? Apart from the weather and the size and everything else you've just mentioned, are there any major like fun differences or things that really did surprise you about your home?
It's funny, actually. It's not that different because I find that both countries have a very warm people, and so I feel like that helped me when I moved here. Family is everybody's very centered around family, and I feel like it's kind of like that back home as well. And even whether or not you're religious, it has that kind of background to it, a fairly similar background that I grew up with, people here grew up with as well. So it wasn't that different in that respect. Obviously, the big things are the weather. They're both insanely green countries as well. So that's always a pretty nice thing. But I'm from a country that doesn't have a lot of mountain ranges and stuff like that. So here, not just the weather, but the terrain is just so different than what I'm used to. I mean, in Belfast, they say it's in a valley, but it's not really when you compare it to the Central Valley here. We're surrounded by huge mountains.
Yeah. You arrive in San Jose and the plateau up here, you don't really notice you're 3,000 feet above sea level.
Until you go somewhere.
Hills on one side and a mountain range on the other.
Right.
Amazing bowl. What's one piece of advice you would give somebody thinking about relocation or moving from your side, based on your experience?
Be sure you want to. It's funny that I feel like people feel like they want to move away from home until they do it, and so for me, obviously, like I said, it was fairly easy because I've never been one that's felt attached to Ireland, just to my family, really. So if you feel like you like a lot of your comforts, your large house with your large yard and stuff, you're not going to live in the city and have that. Even the suburbs here are fairly congested. So I don't know. Just figure out what you want to do for work. If you're retired, it's fairly easy to move here. If you don't like it, you can move back. But if you need to come here and find a job, obviously getting your residency and figuring out what it is you want to do, if you can work from home, so just more practical things, because I think that you touched on it before. If you're going to move here, I wouldn't do what I did necessarily. I would come down, check it out, maybe once or twice on quick vacations, or if you do have a work from home job, come down and spend, you're allowed 90 days here on a tourism visa. Come down, spend 90 days, maybe you can get a couple of Airbnbs, one in the city, one in the mountains, one on the beach, see what you like most. And that's a month each, so you can do that fairly easily. And you can also figure out from that what fits more financially as well. Like, it's probably a little bit more for rent in a nice apartment in the beach, but it's probably going to be cheaper at the beach to eat than what it is in San Jose and the nicer restaurants and,
of course.
and that kind of thing, so yeah, just come down for as long as you can and do your research.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. No, I totally agree. That's some really good advice. As you mentioned earlier, you've raised your kids now. You've got a small family. As an Irish expat living with your Tika wife, what's some of the pros and cons about raising kids in Costa Rica?
Well, like the weather's a big thing, and obviously people might people might think that's kind of overselling the weather a little bit, but it's growing up in this kind of climate. I just went on vacation last week to Manuel Antonio, which is in the Central Pacific, place that we really love.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we can do that at the drop of a hat versus, getting the flights and getting the travel insurance and getting the new wardrobe and all that kind of stuff. Like they've got all these clothes already. We can just drive 2.5 hours or so over to the beach. Declan and Killian, my two boys, were seeing monkeys all over the place, iguanas. It's just really a different way of life than what it is back home. Doesn't necessarily mean it's better. I just prefer it. Otherwise, we would have gone back already because school is free in Belfast and it's not free here. Well, if you want your kids to go to private school, it's not free here. So yeah, and schools are great as well. Even the public school system is very, very good. Obviously, I just wanted to make sure the boys are being educated bilingually as well. So that's why they're at the private school.
Yeah, sure.
And it's not too expensive. And they love it, and the teachers are great, and yeah, so we like bringing the boys up here. It's not to say we never will move anywhere else, but for now it's working really, really well for us.
Nice. You've led me on very nicely to my next question, which is, we've discussed a lot on this channel about the cost of living in Costa Rica, some things more expensive than others, but in a nutshell, can you explain a bit about the difference in cost of living before you had kids and then the cost of living afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, we've always had, 2-3 bedroom type homes. So the price for our home hasn't really increased that much. Just some electricity and water and stuff, just little bits here and there.
Yeah.
But obviously the private school comes into it as well. The boys are still pretty young, so they're not at when they go to their next level of school, it will be a little bit more expensive, but right now, I mean, we're probably spending somewhere around $500-600 on schooling for both, so it's not too expensive. But when they move to the next phase, they'll stay there until graduation when they're 18. So that starts to get a bit more expensive as you get older as well. But as far as the other things, like dining and stuff like that, just all you got to do is just add a little bit for little people, so and we're a family of vegetarians as well, so like eating for us is probably a little bit cheaper than what it is for some other people, so but then on the other hand, when we want to buy like meat substitutes, like fake chicken burgers or fake sausages and stuff, that stuff's pretty expensive, because it's all imported. Everything is imported here. It's expensive. So if you want those kind of things, which we do like, and the kids, obviously all kids love chicken nuggets, whether they're vegetarian or not. So we got to buy our version for the kids, so so those little things are, a little bit pricey, but we don't buy meat, so it's no big deal,
Sure, and that should be a point to any family of 4, 5, or even 6 thinking about immigrating. They shouldn't be, discouraged because of cost. It's not that much.
I don't think so. I mean, we'd probably spend, even though our school would be free if we lived in Belfast. Our cost of living would probably still be a little bit more. We never spent money on heating or we never spent money on heating. Plus, we live in San Jose, so we don't spend it on cooling either.
The lovely temperate climate.
We got no central heating or AC costs ever. So, and gas here is about the same as it is back home in Belfast. So I think we'd probably spend a little bit more in Belfast versus here, to be fair.
Interesting. I know we've been here for, as you say, well over 10 years now. When people back home ask you, well, how safe is it, Aidan, to live in Costa Rica with your family as a developing country? What's your response to them?
I tell them that I grew up in Belfast in the 80s.
There you go.
No, seriously though, I mean, it's pretty safe. I mean, I wouldn't go around taking photos in a dark park at 11 p.m. with a big SLR camera or something, but I wouldn't do that anywhere. But I've never felt unsafe. I know that there's things like muggings and stuff like that
Yeah.
that can happen in certain parts of the city, but that happens in certain parts of every city. I just don't go there, or I drive there, or so it's a bit of common sense, and it's completely safe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes, one of my biggest, we were talking about culture shocks earlier. When you come into the country, I wasn't used to seeing so many cables. I
Yeah,
see, like, I felt like I was in like
yeah, it's
one of
all
those
above
Hollywood,
ground, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Mexico, yeah, Mexico scene from some American Hollywood film. And I was like, oh wow, and the big Coca-Cola, and I
Mm-hmm.
guess that hyperactivity of people, the hustle and bustle with
Mm-hmm.
less order is one of those things that maybe you see and it just kind of disorients you slightly.
Yeah, yeah. It might seem unsafe because of that kind of stuff, but I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, stuff that obviously happens. It happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But if you use your common sense, you'll be fine. I mean, I've never felt unsafe.
Yeah, awesome. I wanted to ask you, do you have any fun, typical Costa Rica stories that have only happened to you and that would only happen in Costa Rica when you think, in Costa Rica down the years? What's one that comes to mind?
Hmm. Can't really think of any that come to mind right now. But just like in general, and again, it's kind of like the bus things. All my kind of crazy stories in Central America centered around bus stations. But I was going to get the bus to Jaco Beach like maybe 7 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and there was somebody selling crates of um, baby chicks on the
Baby
bus.
chicks, small
Yeah,
chicks.
yeah, small chickens,
Yeah,
crates of
yeah.
them, selling them on the bus. There's who's buying this on the way to the beach? Like, I didn't get it.
You,
you
re-
know?
you might want to, did they spend the whole journey with you? Because at least then you
No,
can
no,
buy
no.
one.
They were there at the bus stop,
See, I
like
love
at the
that.
bus station in San Jose before it
Okay.
left.
See,
I
I
was
love
like,
that
if you're
mentality.
going to buy
Where
these,
can
are
you
you
book it?
buying these to bring them to your house or something? And I just didn't understand that.
When you
I didn't really notice if anybody bought one or not.
This is what's great. My question: where do you put it? Say you buy a baby chick, or do you just have it in your bag?
Overhead in the overhead bin.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. I remember years ago I was on one of the local boulevards going to work, and I was on a bus. And the bus, we have the chicken buses, the older American school buses that were still used. Some of them today. Terrible suspension. I'm standing up because all the seats are full, and the roads are pretty bumpy. You leave the bottom. This was a few years ago, but we had to overtake two Ticos, two locals on the back of a moped. They both had their helmets on, but the guy on the back had a huge pickaxe right in between. And you just think driving in Costa Rica is quite crazy, but that's an accident, and it's just, waiting to happen.
Yeah, people use their cell phones texting on motorcycles.
Yeah,
That's nuts.
you've got one. I mean, yeah, tell me about it. Well, I'll remember the chicken story. That's pretty good. Well, a couple of questions before I leave you. I did have one going back to the family. You mentioned about the tips for people looking to relocate. What about if a family specifically wanted to relocate? Would you suggest the same thing? Come with your whole family for a vacation or anything?
Yeah, they could, or at least for part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty important that your kids are going to like it, but
Yeah.
obviously most parents know their kids fairly well.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that the hardest part of relocating with kids is actually the leaving, not really the getting somewhere. So it's obviously going to be pretty sad for a kid to leave their school friends and stuff like that. But so I would imagine that's the hardest part of moving with children, moving away from grandparents or cousins and friends and stuff.
When your boys go back with you back home to Ireland, what's it like for them? What's
Well, only Declan has been, because
okay?
Killian's only 2 and everything happened last year
Yeah,
when they
true.
were supposed
Yeah,
to.
there you go.
Right. So, but they did happen to come here while he was 6 months old before anything kind of crazy in the world happened. So Declan loves knowing that he has that part of him, that Irish kind of part of him, and he really enjoys. Like, I've got a pretty big family back home. I got 4 siblings, and all 4 siblings have 3 kids. One of those kids has a couple of kids now as well.
Wow,
So
okay.
it's Yeah, so it's a big family, so they enjoy getting together. The kids love that, they love
Yeah,
getting together with their families. And so Declan's experienced it. Kelly, and hopefully maybe next year we'll get to experience that.
As soon as we can travel freely. None of your family back home from Ireland has followed you over here to Costa Rica yet then?
To live? No, they've come to visit a few times, but no, everybody else lives within a few kilometers of my parents.
Yeah,
so.
That close-knit unity. Well, before I leave you, I like to ask everybody, what do you wish you could have told yourself 10 years ago now, just before a younger Aidan gets on that plane to Costa Rica, just to perhaps prepare yourself?
Study Spanish more.
Okay.
Really try to develop those language skills. I just think that life would have been a bit easier, and also start the immigration process before coming instead of doing it when I got here.
Okay. What would that entail?
Well, because I was married already, I just could have gone to the consulate in London and started it there.
And save you the time on the ground when you got over here.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier because here we've got hundreds, if not thousands, of people applying.
Yeah.
All the time in London.
Sure.
Just a small handful.
Like you say earlier, patience is key. It's a virtue. It's pura vida.
One day we'll see.
Aidan, thank you so much for joining us. You've been a wealth of knowledge. I'll put all your information and contact details in the description box below. So if anybody wants to reach out from you from Ireland, Britain, Europe, the States, anybody watching around the world, they can ask you if they have any questions about families.
Sounds good. I'm here for them.
Relocating, fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Adam.
Talk to you in a future episode.
Yep, no worries.
Look forward to it.
Yep.
Hasta luego. Ciao. There we go, guys. A great chat with Aidan, especially when it comes to moving to Costa Rica and raising a family here. If you have any questions for him, let us know in the comments box below, and either Aidan or myself will get back to you. And please don't forget to hit like if you've enjoyed the video, and of course subscribe to never miss out on an episode of Trial Costa Rica. I'm Adam Baker, and I'll see you guys next week. Ciao for now.